From the William B. Travis Building in Austin, Texas, we're keeping Texas energy on track. Here's your host, Bryce Doobie.
Welcome to Texas Energy on Track, the official podcast of the Railroad Commission of Texas. I'm your host, Bryce Doobie, joined as always by my co-host and producer, Nick Craynock. Nick, good day to you, sir.
Yeah, good day to you too. It's podcast day. As I always say, it's always my favorite day to get back in the studio and learn about some new things with some of the great people that work here at the commission.
Absolutely. And this is one I know there are listeners out there and folks who follow the Railroad Commission who they're going to see the title of this episode. They're subscribed, or if they're not subscribed, they're going across one of our channels and they go, oh, this is one I need to listen to, because this is something that has been for several years now in the news. It's gained a lot of attention, and we're talking about the theft of petroleum products, which is why today we are thrilled to be joined by Jason Clark. He is the Director of Agency Projects, here to talk to us about STOPTheft. Sir, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Thank you so much for joining us. Just before we dive into this too much, because I know we'll probably have some ground rules to explain when we're talking about all of this with STOPTheft and things, but tell us a little about yourself. How long have you been with the commission? What's your background?
Sure. So my background, I've been with the commission now going on 10 years. I started off in the oil and gas division, and then about 5 years ago, I moved up to the executive office where I became the Director of Agency Projects.
Let's go back in time, I think, a little bit to this past legislative session, Senate Bill 494. That created the Stop Theft Task Force. Tell us a little bit about that. What was that trying to address and trying to solve when this was established?
Well, what I can say is that through testimony and through published reports, the bill authors looked at establishing a new task force that was going to be made up of three distinct areas that didn't exist before. Their goal was to have the task force meet and coordinate their efforts to come up with a solid set of recommendations that will begin to investigate and eliminate the theft of petroleum products in Texas.
Now, one sort of question when we're looking into that, how does the Railroad Commission fit into this when we're talking about this task force?
That's a great question. The Railroad Commission, we were the appointers of those individuals that were selected to be on the task force.
And I remember at that time, after the bill was passed and signed into law, we put out press releases and things soliciting applicants and stuff. So this wasn't us just picking folks by name. There was a pool of applicants, correct?
Right. All applicants had to fill out an application, and the selections were then based on their experience and knowledge within the oil field industry. Getting
to really kind of the crux of all of this, how significant is petroleum theft in Texas, and why did lawmakers feel that a formal task force was really necessary?
You know, as I said earlier, based on previous legislative testimony and multiple published reports, they have indicated that the theft of petroleum products is rising. That may be why the legislator decided to create the task force.
And when we're looking at all of this, what are they sort of reviewing? Is it the laws? What's kind of like, and you're seeing, looking at these solutions and things, what is sort of that end state goal with the task force?
Well, what the task force is trying to do and why it was put together was to really take a look through different facets of the entire process. We wanted to make sure that there is representation from stakeholders within the oil field industry, within law enforcement, and within the regulator itself, the Railroad Commission. We need to get a platform that allowed all three different members the opportunity to discuss what's happening out in the field and how we could better coordinate our efforts to eliminate theft in the future.
And when we're talking about in the future, I know another requirement in SB 494 is to deliver a report to the governor and the legislature. It is not we're facilitating this task force. This is not we are not doing this. The task force.
Right. The task force does not reside within the Railroad Commission. The task force is made up of 11 selected members and 2 participating advisors. Our Railroad Commission chairman, Chairman Wright, is actually the presiding officer of the task force. I'm just merely on staff to project manage and make sure that the task force meets the end goal, which is delivering that report that you mentioned on December 1st in 2026.
With that report, again, getting back to that question, what are we looking for here? And what is sort of the expectations with that? I know this is the first year of it, so it's very premature, I would imagine.
Right. So we are currently in the information gathering stage of developing the report. We've had multiple presentations from our law enforcement partners, federal, state, and local, that kind of tell us their experience of what's happening out in the oil fields, so that way we can understand their perspective and their point of view. And sometimes those officers and those agencies didn't get a chance or a platform to coordinate their efforts and better understand what's working in one county versus the other. Because, the theft of petroleum products kind of spans between counties as well as between states. So there could be instances where it is happening in one county and it starts there in the morning and it finishes in another county in the afternoon or in the evening, and one sheriff's office would need to communicate to another sheriff's office. That way they know what to look out for.
And I know with this task force and these 11 members that it includes representatives, like you said, from industry, trade associations, like you said, local, state, federal, law enforcement. How are all of you said they were picked by their backgrounds and things. What sort of is the kind of makeup of the members?
Well, we wanted to make sure that they had some level of security experience because, again, we're talking about meeting with operators that are not only in these spaces where theft is occurring, but they also have law enforcement experience, they have security experience, just things that would help us better understand. I mean, if we get people in a room and we all have the same level of experience, we're probably not going to learn a lot. But if we take advantage of that level of experience that exists out in the field, everybody's going to be more the better for it.
And you said federal, so and I know looking at the membership list, that includes the FBI. How do they fit in? I mean, I'm sure their perspective, because they're looking at not just us, but national, transnational. I mean, they bring a very interesting perspective to this, I would imagine.
Yes. I mean, I can say that it's important to the FBI. They've actually had a headquarters office in Midland, Texas since 2008.
Oh, wow. So they've had an office since 2008 out there. What else do they do? I mean, because I imagine this is much broader for them.
Sure. Even from a technology perspective, they have access to what is known as the VCC, or the Virtual Command Center. And that's a critical incident management system that law enforcement can use to post, track, and spread information across departments and jurisdictions in a quick and very secure way. This is something that they've actually allowed us to take a look into. I've seen some of the information on there, and it is very interesting how theft is reported and how quickly other offices can get that information.
And then on the other side of that coin as well is the local representatives, county sheriffs and things like that. What's their role? I mean, they're much more boots on the ground, I would imagine.
Yeah, they're really the first line of defense when it comes to theft prevention. We want to make sure that they receive the training and the education that our federal partners can provide. They're also who is called out to, when the theft is reported, they're first on the scene, along with some of our district office representatives, to really find out what happened, make sure that it's documented correctly, and make sure that it's reported.
And I know this is a little tricky to kind of get into because the numbers it's still all being gathered and things, but I know that there was some data that had been cited that about 40% of operators have experienced some sort of theft in the past year. I mean, what does that really, I mean, this shows that there's a scale to this, correct?
Yeah, I would say that the number that we have listed on the website, which is the 40%, that's directly tied to a statistic from the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas, where they had a survey report that they sent out to operators, and that 40% was based on the responses. So 40% of their respondents said it was a big deal and important, and it affected them. So yeah, I think it's very important that we have to take a look at it.
And I think that's why it would kind of tie back into, with this being the information gathering phase, I know that was one of the items they were tasked for within the bill, was to determine the scope of all of this and the economic impact, because we're talking about, I mean, it could be significant.
Yes. Any theft of a petroleum product in Texas will have downstream ramifications. Any amount of tax dollars that are not available to be used or to be utilized by organizations that rely on those tax dollars is significant.
And I think that's something when I first saw the bill and all that, it was like, oh yeah, well, preventing crime and all that. I hadn't made the connection mentally yet for me about the impact that it has for state tax collection and things. I'd recently gone and spoke to elementary school, and one of the slides we had up was like, oh yeah, the tax dollars that the RRC collects off with petroleum production goes to schools and roads and all of these things. There is a long tail to this whole thing.
Yeah, it's something where it could be as simple as their local tax economy is going to get affected. But when you think of the state as a whole, we produce in every corner of the state. And so if it's happening in the Permian or if it's happening in the Eagleford, theft of petroleum products is a significant issue. And that's why the task force is looking at how deeply entrenched are those tax issues beyond the normal school. There's so many different downstream effects. I don't have enough time to tell you about every little facet that it touches, but it is one of those things where you recognize it pretty quickly when we're looking at the amount of production that happens in the state of Texas and the amount that could potentially be stolen or reported as stolen.
And one thing, too, that we've mentioned, we've been very intentional in our phrasing here we're talking theft of petroleum products. What is that, like, in layman's terms, what are we talking about here? What types of petroleum products are being stolen?
Sure. Everything from your high-value tools that are used to aid in the production process to physical trucks, copper pipe, tubing, and actual barrels of oil. Storage tanks, all of those things are potential targets for theft.
And this has been something that I think we've heard. This isn't just me and I pull up in my pickup truck and this has evolved into a much more sophisticated crime over time from what we've seen.
I would say yes. Based on some publications that I've read and some classified presentations that have been provided by law enforcement officials, I would say yes. It's now more nuanced in that organizations are looking at where fields are producing. They're looking at where transportation occurs. They're looking at where the product is stored or held, and then they're looking for a weak point that they can go and exploit.
It's a lot really to take in when you think about all of this and just kind of the scope of what it could be from on the ground to all those longer term economic impacts. So it's really interesting. I know, so we've had 2 meetings so far, and you've been in both of those.
We've had 2 quarterly meetings. That is correct. We have monthly update meetings because in the span of 12 months, we needed to make sure that information doesn't lag. So we established a monthly meeting ever since the task force inception. Outside of that, we've had 2 quarterly meetings with a third coming up that will be held in our July regulatory conference.
I guess going back, that first meeting was in November? What were some of the big priorities coming out of that first meeting?
Well, we wanted to make sure, again, that all of the task force members understood their role and basically their commitment level. This is something that they applied for, they wanted to participate in, and so we wanted to make sure that they had that comfortability to talk about and discuss things that are happening not only close to them locally, but also to the state as a whole.
And I don't want to forget, I was looking through my notes here and I kind of glossed over it. So we have law enforcement participants, we have industry participants, we also have academic independent operators who are a part of this as well, and some of the trades and things.
Right. We've tried to cover everything from your large, medium to small operators, your independents, but also we needed help from academia to make sure that this report is something that resonates with the legislature. These are security officials. These are people that do law enforcement on a daily basis. Writing this report may not be a strength of theirs, but we are going to lean on expertise in other areas that have already done training, or in the instance of our petroleum advisor, he is actually a renowned professor of petroleum and engineering.
I think one thing that's interesting, what laws are already on the books, correct?
Right. So we're going to take a look at our own laws and regs within the state of Texas. The task force will look at determining if any of those need to be changed or improved, or if there's other measures that need to be implemented with our current forms that would allow us to have a better data tracking mechanism for this type of reported theft of petroleum product.
And that also would include, I would imagine, potentially law enforcement training in some of these areas as well, and improvements to that, or maybe some recommendations.
That is actually part of the charge of the bill. The Department of Public Safety is putting on what they refer to as TCOL training, and that's the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, that allows local officers around the state to go in and get a better understanding about theft prevention tactics and provide them more situational awareness so that when they're out in the field, they know what to look for.
So again, we have a report due December 1st of this year, and that's going to have these initial recommendations and things.
Right. So what the task force decided to do was create 4 subcommittees to take on the charges inside the bill. One of the subcommittees would be laws and regs, and that's going out and looking at local, state, and even global laws and regulations to find out if there's anything that's had a positive impact, and if so, we could go ahead and replicate that effort if it was feasible. The other one is going to be kind of a background and overview subcommittee. subcommittee. And what that does is look at the history of what's been happening. I told you about the FBI has had an office and maintained one in Midland since 2008. So you have to figure, going back that far, oil theft's been happening way before then. The other subcommittee that we have is going to talk about the economic impact analysis. And that's a charge in the bill where they really want to take a look at those long-term impacts, not just the short term. We want to make sure that we understand if this is occurring at the level and scope and rises, what are the potential downstream effects if we don't start taking a look at how to mitigate those? The last one would be our general recommendations subcommittee. That subcommittee is really the compiler of the information. It's going to allow us to better understand what our other subcommittees have come up with, but also taking a look at the full scope of the charge itself, and then coming back with some recommendations that we can hopefully implement in the near future. I mean, this is going to take work on everybody's parts. And again, that's going back to why the task force was created in the beginning.
This is not a one and done thing either.
No, it is not. This is an ongoing effort that is written into law until at least 2030. And we owe the legislature a report on December 1st of every even number year. So our next update to this report will not be due until 2028.
Got it. But even number years, knowing Texas and legislation, that is significant. So get it out ahead of them heading into the next session.
Yeah, this is definitely the first domino, if you will. And once we push this down, we can get the go-ahead and the buy-in on some of those recommendations, again, to start implementing and see how that can help mitigate or eliminate the theft of the petroleum products in Texas.
From your perspective, as again, facilitating all of this, what does success look like?
In my opinion, success would be measured by delivering the report on December 1st. I think that's the first domino in this entire process. Once we understand what some of those recommendations are and the timeline to actually get those implemented, it'll help us when our next report is due in 2028. The Railroad Commission's role within the task force, the chairman is the presiding officer, but the task force members run the task force. We are just here to make sure that the report is delivered on time or delivered in a timely fashion.
So I guess kind of in conclusion, if you could send one message really to operators, law enforcement, and the public in general about STOPTheft's mission, what would it be?
I would say working with the task force is a privilege. Our commitment to the state of Texas is that we will work diligently to seek out and provide recommendations that will work to eliminate any future theft of petroleum products in Texas.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for joining us
Yeah,
today.
I'm glad I was able to do this.
Yeah, like this is one of those topics I know has been, I mean, I get calls out of the blue from folks wanting more information and things like that. And I know we've got some resources on the website and there's more meetings, and this report will be coming out in December. So I really do appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to illuminate a little bit more about STOPTheft.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
So, Nick, I was looking forward to this one for a while. This has been one of those ones that we saw it really kind of evolve from bill in the legislature last year into announcements for applicants into, hey, this is its first meeting. This has been something that's been really neat to see just in my time since I've been here at the RC. So I really appreciate that Jason was able to join us and really kind of shed a little bit more light on this topic.
Yeah, I think it's getting out there. I mean, people need to know about it. So if we can help shine some light on that like we did. I mean, I learned stuff because, I really didn't know a whole lot. I'm not dealing with it in media or, talking to a lot of people about it. But I'm like, okay, now I understand it better because obviously I know there's theft that's going on with petroleum products. But now, like, okay, now I got with our role and with the task force, and it's a lot bigger than I thought it was, to be honest. I didn't know the FBI was even involved, but that makes sense.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting, again, as he mentioned, that first domino and how this is all going to kind of move forward from here. So it's going to be an exciting thing. I'm sure we're going to have some follow-up episodes on this down the road. So really kind of jazzed to kind of get out there and really kind of do a show about this. But if I wanted to listen to some of our previous shows, just to transition awkwardly into our normal segue here at the end, where can folks find us online?
Yeah, if you want to get those previous shows, or if you want to get notifications and listen for some of those follow-up shows in the future, you can subscribe. Make sure you do that. That's the number one thing you need to do with your favorite podcast app, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. We are on YouTube. We're on Amazon, Audible, Alexa. I did try that out my own. I said, Alexa, play Texas Energy on Track. It played. So it works, which is really cool. Because my wife was like, oh, that's you. I'm like, yep, that's pretty cool. It works. So you can do that on Amazon, Alexa. We're on a bunch of other podcast apps. So make sure the biggest thing on your favorite podcast app, subscribe, and you'll get those notifications to let you know when a new episode is out and ready to go. You can also follow along on our social media with the Railroad Commission of Texas. We're on X at TXRRC. We are on Facebook and LinkedIn, Railroad Commission of Texas. We're on Instagram at Railroad Commission of Texas. YouTube, search Railroad Commission of Texas. We're out there. We put a lot of information out, so make sure you check that out. Also,
if you want to find some of these resources that we mentioned on these shows, if you want to fact check me on what the date was for the first Stop Theft meeting, all of that is on our website. You can go to rrc.texas.gov for more information. But as always, this has been Texas Energy on Track, the official podcast of the Railroad Commission of Texas, and we'll talk to y'all soon.